So we haven't done this in a while, but if you want to stand for the reading of the word, if you're able, and we will begin with this small little parable that can sometimes be forgotten, and it's Luke 13, 6 through 9, and it says, "And he began telling the parable. A man had a fig tree which had been planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it, and he did not find any. And he said to the vineyard keeper, 'Look, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree without finding any. Just cut it down. Why does it even use up the ground?' But the vine dresser answered, and he said, 'Sir, leave it alone for this year too, until I dig around it, until I put in fertilizer. And if it bears fruit next year, fine, but if not, cut it down.'" Luke 13, 6 through 9. You may be seated. So it's one of Jesus' parables. It's another one about a fig tree. A lesson learned here is, like, if you're going to grow fig trees, they got to do well, because there's so many stories with them in the Bible. When you talk about trees in the Bible are the third most talked about living thing outside of God and people. So even though all the animal sacrifices, trees play an important role. And a lot of times they're kind of synonymous with who we are. And so what does this mean when we look at this passage? Well, first I want to say that God is the master gardener. God is the master gardener. He knows how to plant, he knows when to reap, when to sow, and he knows how to guide us in our lives. But another lesson I want to pick out in this verse is that he gives second chances. That the owner was ready to just get rid of this tree. He said, "I've been coming to this tree every time and it's not growing anything. Please just get rid of it." And yet he is given a second chance to say, "Here, give me one more year. Maybe then we can produce something." And then he wants to make sure that the plant is healthy. So he looks at it, and the lesson here is that good roots produce good fruits. Good roots produce good fruits. I've got some pepper plants at home. I always grow some pepper plants every year. One, because I can grow them. Any other vegetable, any other thing we try, it's just like animals get to it, they die, it gets hot, there's not enough bees to pollinate. There's always some kind of excuse. Pepper plants always work. And so I always do that. And so this year, I did have 2 that just died. And I was like, what gives? Like, they were good-looking ones. They were pretty big. The one that produced was the smallest plant of them all. And so even though that it was small, it still had good enough roots that it was still able to produce something. And so we can't be caught up in just what things look like. We have to look at what it's producing. As we dig into this verse today, into this passage of this parable, I want to focus on the King James Version. Every year when I read the Bible, I read it in a different translation because it helps work my mind. And in the King James Version, those that know already know that it says, "In answering, he said unto him, 'Let it alone this year till I dig about it and dung it.'" Until I dig it and dung it. That's what we're talking about today. So this first section, we're going to talk about digging it. Digging it. So we've got to lay the groundwork a little bit first. And when we talk about digging is pretty uncomfortable. When we talk about digging, it's important when it comes to growing a plant, right? Is anyone watching the World Cup? Yeah, I'm going to be I'm just going to feel so lost this week once the final game's over today, because it's just all going to be over with. I've been used to it's amazing that the sermons even come about, because I've been watching every game. But, because we were here in America, we were also in Canada, and we were also in Mexico, and we had all these different locations. They wanted to make sure that all of these fields felt like they were the same field. And so the FIFA came up with this plan where they made a special type of seed to grow the sod. They didn't want to use any fake turf because people get injured on it. So they came up with a specific blend of seed. They grew the grass on plastic so that it could be rolled up and transported into the stadiums. And then for some of these arenas, they had giant UV lights that would come in and hover over the grass to make sure it would grow. They also would stitch synthetic fibers into the base of the grass to make sure that it was like a rebar for the natural grass, so that it wouldn't move around, because it's on plastic. It's not actually in the ground. Once installed, they would then monitor it constantly. They would probe it for moisture. They would aerate it to feed it oxygen. oxygen to the roots and prolong its life. They would even mow it. I guess it was still growing, just a finite amount, but they were like, we've got to keep it perfect. So they would still keep mowing the grass. They would also test it they would shoot soccer balls at it at 17 degrees at 50 miles an hour over and over again to see how it bounces, to prove how the grass is working. A lesson with it is that they needed to make sure that it could survive a downpour of rain, but that it wouldn't dry out. But it also had to stay firm enough to play fast, but not too firm to where it would hurt players. So they had to find this perfect blend of grass. There's a picture of the UV lights on the grass, of all the work that goes into just having a field for soccer. Now, if you're not good at sports, maybe you're just not playing on the right grass. Maybe that's the lesson here. But I want to say that even though it looked so good, even though they did so many tests, if you were to dig into it, you would just find plastic. If you were to dig into it, you would just find these synthetic fibers that were trying to hold it together, that if we kept it there for years on end, it would not continue to look like it does. It wouldn't survive because it wouldn't have any more dirt underneath there. It wouldn't have anything to dig itself into. The reality here is that you can't dig into a fake plant. If I take a fake potted plant and I want to dig into it and see what the bottom looks like, I'm not going to find anything. It's going to be like, is it cake, where you're just like trying to slice it open? It's not real. And so you can't dig into a fake plant. So when we are asking God to dig into our lives and to search us, it requires a level of honesty and authenticity and a level of saying, God, here I am, my true self. Richard J. Foster says this: superficiality is the curse of our age. The doctrine of instant satisfaction is a primary spiritual problem. The desperate need today is not for a greater number of intelligent people or gifted people. We have plenty of those, but what we need are deep people. We need deep people, that they're all shallow. And so we want to make sure that we are going to be deep people. And when we're trying to be deep, we need to make sure that our roots are deep in the correct place. We need to make sure that they're in with God, that letting God dig into our heart requires honesty and vulnerability. It takes a lot to go to God and say, okay, God, please just tell me what I need to do. Look into me and find all of the errors that I need to get rid of. Find the rocks that are stopping my roots from growing. Digging can feel disruptive, yet it prepares us to grow. When you've got a nice garden and you're trying to plant something, you have to make a little mess first, right? When you're making a mess, you've got to come in and you've got to dig out a spot, you've got to mark it, you've got to replace the dirt. You're probably not going to be perfect. There's probably going to be little specks of dirt somewhere unless you're like grabbing every tiny little piece. And so it might ruin your perfect looking garden, but it's necessary in order to have the plant there. And so sometimes things in our life is getting uprooted. Sometimes objects in our life are being taken away so that we can grow. If your roots are forgotten, then your fruits will be rotten, is this quote. If your roots are forgotten, then your fruits will be rotten. If we forget about what we're holding our lives into, that we're just focusing on God, if we forget about all of that, then we're going to start growing towards a different thing. You look at plants, there's so many plants that they tend to grow towards the sun, you know? And we need to be a body of believers that are growing towards the sun, that we are going after him to go after what we truly need. G.K. Chesterton said this: and the more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it had established a rule and order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild. I love that phrase, for good things to run wild. See, we sometimes think when we're looking at the Bible and we're looking at the things that God has told us to do, we start focusing on all the things that we're told not to do. We start focusing on all the negative things, all the stuff like we can't do that, we can't do this, and we start feeling like we're just in a potted plant, that we've got walls all the way around us and we can't get out. But God says, no, you're supposed to be like a tree planted by rivers of water, that there is plenty of room for you to run wild, plenty of room for you to be with me and to grow further out, that there is more to this story than just being in a potted plant. Psalm 139 says this: search me, God, and know my heart. Put me to the test and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there's any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. Search me, God. This is like a call. This is a cry. It's hard to read this verse and just, say it nonchalantly. Do you realize what this is asking? That you're asking God, the maker of heaven and earth, to look into your innermost being and examine your life. We don't even do that with other people. We don't even do that with people that we can converse with like perfectly. And so we're going to God, who is above all, who has the ability to do all, and we're saying, God, search me. I want you to know what's wrong with me. I want you to know my anxiety. I want you to know what's affecting me. See if there's anything hurtful in me and get rid of it. Because that's the only way that you can be led into this everlasting way, is if you remove those things. J.C. Ryle says this: "Fear not because your prayer is stammering and your words are feeble and your language is poor. Jesus can understand you." When we're asking God all these things, sometimes we don't know how to ask him. I listened to a message the other day, and the pastor was talking about how someone was talking to him, and the guy was like, "Oh man, I would just love to be in the room when you're praying to God." And that pastor was like, "No, you wouldn't, because I don't really know how to pray." He was like, I get up here and talk, but when I pray, I fall asleep, I get distracted, I have 1,000 thoughts going through my mind. And I think many of us are that same way, and we think we don't really know how to articulate the words to ask God what we even know what to ask for. And it doesn't matter, because Jesus knows who we are. He understands us. Even when our language is poor, even when our words are feeble, even when we can't quite get it out, he understands us. And so when we need to just let him understand us, let him dig into our lives, that we have to make sure that we have this relationship with him to do so. See, Jesus cares more about the relationship with you than he does about the things you can do for him. You should do things for God, but it is very easy to do things for God and not actually know God. Because God is all about love and all of these great things, and we can serve people, we can love people, we can help people, we can do those things without knowing Jesus. We have to have a relationship with him, and when we have a relationship with him, that tends to cause us to do more things for him. But we need to make sure that we actually know him, that he cares more about knowing us than he does about us doing things for him. That doing something for someone doesn't create intimacy. You have to know the person. Many of you know that I used to work in some of the movies and stuff. And so, there's this concept of 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon. So it's like every actor is however many people away from Kevin Bacon. They either worked with him, and then they worked with that person, then worked with that person. So I worked with Kevin Bacon one time. So that means I'm 1 degree Kevin Bacon. All of you are now 2 degrees Kevin Bacon. I could not go to Kevin Bacon's house, say, "Hey, what's up, man?" and then be like, "Hey, can I come in for dinner?" He's going to be like, I don't even remember you. He's like, "I don't know you." And it's like, just because I worked with him and I did things for him, talked to him a couple of times, doesn't mean I have a relationship with him. I'm going to be like, "But Kevin, please, just let me in the door. I'm 1%, 1 degree." And he's going to be like, "Well, I'm 0 degrees. I am Kevin Bacon. Please, just leave. I'm calling the cops." And so when we're talking about having a relationship with someone, we have to know them. We can't just know about them. We can't just be in the same room with them. We have to actually know them. And I think historically we've had this issue in our lives. When you look at the Bible, there's so many times where the Israelites, they have God guiding them personally. The God there is present. And yet, what do? They say, "No, we want a king. We want someone else to talk to God and tell us what to do. We can't do that." And so I think a lot of times we want people to mediate for us. We want that other thing, because to be in the presence of God means to change. That if someone else is conversing with God and telling us what to do, then we have a little bit of a layer here. We've got a little bit of a buffer. But if we are going to God and we are in the presence of God, that is going to require us to change. You have no choice. Psalm 62:8 says this: "Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts before him. God is a refuge for us." Trust in him at all times. That's a hard thing to do. We don't trust in anything at all times. And yet, we have got to trust in God at all times. We have to pour our hearts before him. We have to have this level of honesty and intimacy where we just let God dig in and see how good our roots are, see what we've attached ourselves to, and that we've got to let God be a refuge for us. If God is a refuge for us, then that means we are completely trusting in Him. We are letting Him protect us. We are letting Him surround us, that we have to actually know Him. You see, when we talk about the fig trees and we talk about digging, we have to know that digging reveals the health. I went in a different kind of direction when I was preparing for this, and I did a lot of reading, did a lot of listening, but this time I did that, but I also I started reading gardening blogs and listening to some gardening podcasts, because I was like, well, we're talking about the fig tree, we're talking about roots, let me get into that mindset. And which is just kind of funny to me, because one of the podcasts, there's two guys talking, and the other guy's like, so when did you get interested in figs? And I'm like, what kind of question is that? Interested in figs, And it was true, though. He was just talking all this stuff about the amazement of figs. And so a few things I learned, I don't even like figs, but a few things I learned is that most fig trees purchased are grafted or grown from another. So you can do them from seed, but they are so easy to just cut off a piece that actually some people use fig trees as a way to teach people how to graft and how to propagate, because you can just get a little piece and put it somewhere and it will continue to grow. And when you do that, it actually kind of speeds up the process, where fig trees typically produce fruit within 2 to 3 years when planted from a potted nursery stock. If you're growing from a cutting, they can sometimes fruit within their first growing season. And I thought, wow, because if we're saying it can be that quick, then that means that this owner of the vineyard is right on schedule. He says, look, I know that the fig trees can produce between 2 to 3 years. This is my 3rd year here. Where is the fruit? It seems crazy to me, because I know there's a lot of fruit trees where it's they only produce every other year, it takes time, there's all these different excuses. But this one, there's really no excuse. So digging in, you've got to reveal the health and figure out, okay, well, what's wrong? Because we know that this tree is supposed to be doing what it should do, and it's not. So what's going wrong? And I think that's how it is in our lives. A few other things about fig trees is that they were often planted in vineyards for multiple reasons. So I listened to one pastor claim that it wouldn't be in a vineyard because that would only be for the grapes. They would put fig trees on the outside. And I was like, I don't know. That doesn't really sound right to me. Usually you put them everywhere. And so I started looking a little bit more, and it was actually the opposite, that there's multiple reasons why you would put a fig tree in your vineyard. One is because they could grow figs, and you could have figs and grapes. 2, they also allow vines to grow over them. So if you were really tight on space and you were tired of putting up all of your stakes for your grapes for your wine, you could sometimes let them kind of crawl over the fig tree as well, and so you would get figs and grapes on top of each other. Also, they have an aggressive root system which helps them survive in the most hospitable areas. I listened to a guy that lives in a Mediterranean climate, and he joked about his fig trees, saying that they grow like weeds. And I was like, man, that must be nice. I've got so many weeds in my yard right now. If they were just all fruit, that would be so great. But finally, I think what's the most important here is that the wine growers would use the figs as an ancient test to see if the soil was any good. That they would check to see if the soil was any good. That if they could look in and see how well the fig tree was doing, then they know that they can spend more money on all their grapes and plant them there. Before they waste all their resources with setting up a whole full vineyard, they can wait and they can say, okay, look, the test has been proven. These figs are amazing. Then let's plant and do the rest. And so digging into the roots of the fig tree often reveals the health of the rest of the vineyard. The rest of the vineyard. We think that sometimes when we're just looking at how God is in our lives, especially we as a church, we have to know that how God is working in our lives is also an indicator of how God might be working in each other's lives. We've been in a discipleship series for, months. And so when we're talking about being a church and worshiping together and having fellowship and discipling, we have to look at the fruit and the roots of one another to say, okay, how am I affecting everyone else? Leo Tolstoy said this, everybody thinks of changing humanity, but nobody thinks of changing himself. Everyone wants everyone else to change, and they don't think about, well, I could just start with me. And maybe someone seeing me change will be the result of someone else changing. That all of this change is put together. And so as we look and let God dig into our lives, we have to make sure that it's actually not just about us, but it's also about each other.